Hi everyone, my name's Debbie. I'm Associate Artist at National Theatre of Scotland. I am a white person with curly brown, bob-length hair, and I'm wearing a very chic black jumpsuit. Um, Today, I am going to talk to you about making a show called Exodus, but also about how I learned as a director to work in a green way that is vitally also intersectional. So not only was Exodus a successful example of intermediate green book, it was a massive shift in the root values that I operate from. So today I want to bust one of the most common myths whilst acknowledging what it truly means for freelance directors, the vulnerabilities and the fears as you're trying to deliver brilliant work, survive financially, and now be green. Exodus was the first main stage play by brilliant Scottish Sri Lankan writer Uma Nadaraja. A brutal satire, it told the story of charismatic MP Asia Rao, Home Secretary to a political party that are garnering votes on a swell of anti-immigration sentiment, and who is making a bid for leadership by launching her most ruthless initiative yet. Exodus had been developed by Uma over 4 years, despite getting increasingly relevant, with myself running the two most recent R&Ds, so I was very aware of the challenges. It was one of the most difficult genres, farce. It had reveals, slapstick, in and outs through swinging doors, dream sequences, mistaken identities, and a massive biblical flashback to boot. It was mostly set in two locations on a train, the carriage and the vestibule, and it swung really quickly between the two. It was programmed to Tech in Stirling, run at the Traverse Theatre for the Edinburgh Festival with famously quick turnarounds, and then toured to 6 venues around Scotland of wildly different sizes and setups, as you can see in this overlaid ground plan. Yeah, we've all had that meeting in the production meeting. Beyond the pragmatic jigsaw, it was also speaking to tricky themes of Britishness, toxic political theatrics, white supremacy, and profound cultural change. And as we rehearsed in July 2022, the revolving door exit of many, many Conservative MPs at the time created an even more complex prescience to this darkest of comedies. Working with the designer, Elisa Kalianova, we knew this play needed a dynamic space that spoke to the mechanics of spin, the carousel of media complicity, and political dehumanizing, as well as still being a vibrant comedy. We looked to a combination of high-camp pop culture like David LaChapelle, biblical painting, and sculpture like Farce by Renata Luca. When we were told that we were aiming for Green Book Intermediate, I didn't know what that meant for our process. And honestly, we both feared it meant compromising in ways that neither audiences nor arts journalists would be particularly compassionate to. On a writer's risky debut as well. Would it mean less creativity, less discovery, less control? Would we be supported, or would it be a case of management passing down the blame? I could feel myself being very resistant and worried. But like many mid-career artists, probably a lot in this room, the entirety of our careers had been under austerity. So being clever with your resources within tight parameters has always been the task. Our relationship as director and designer did change. We had to uncomfortably and brilliantly abandon a lot of our assumptions and our default ways of thinking. But the individual wins were many and testament to thinking laterally whilst working from your values. Here, in a play about resisting exploitative, extractive political structures, form really did have to meet content. One example being fast fashion and refusing it. Usually a sensible route for a time-pressured costume department, yes, it's very wasteful, but also it's exploitative of majority female black and brown workers from the global south. So we said no. It meant taking a slower approach, a different timeline, and yes, a lot more work. Another example was we knew we wanted some kind of revolve, but it needed to tour and be put up very quickly. So Elisa took the idea of revolving doors and worked with the exceptional Pretty Scenic company in Glasgow to design a weight-bearing structure from pre-used timber and borrowed truss rather than newly made steel, which would be the obvious solution. One gain from this was that we had the set in the room from week 2. To achieve this, Elisa and I spoke, oh, it plays. It was thrilling at the time. It was thrilling. To achieve this, Elisa and I had to get the carpenters on board with our goals. We had to meet with them and converse with them far more than any other project, where you might easily not ever meet a carpenter that's building your set. Communication became a massive, massive part of this. And I actually learned that in the future, we need even more space to talk about the struggles, blocks, and difficulties, rather than hearing them after the fact. And truthfully, there were moments where the answer was no, we can't do that, it's not green. But the team committed to finding a version of yes that worked for everyone. Exodus was ultimately successful because of 2 elements. Firstly, a committed team. What once would have meant producing a smaller touring show became an ambitious reach due to what was needed to keep it green. We were led by technical director Gemma Swallow that we met earlier, whose unwavering commitment and generosity set the tone. But ultimately, is the institution you're working for truly backing its workers, or is it passing down labour and not financially reflecting that working differently right now means working more? Are they being conscious of what demographic of workers most affected? Are they actively making a space, as NTS did, where precariously employed freelancers can speak about difficulties without fear of punishment? As much as we had to shift our process, NTS had to embrace change. And every budget tells a story about what values you're choosing. As directors, our voices do hold privilege. We are advocates for our team. We can ask for eyes on the budget. We can be critical friends to our institutions, and we can lead with our values and articulate why. Second, we worked intersectionally. We talked about where going green intersected with disability, class, and race. We had to think long-term and globally. Rampant exploitation got us here, so we can't continue it. We need a just reflection of the labour this change requires and plan to different timelines. We made the knowledge open source. You can click on this photo on the website, and you can see the origin of every bit of set material. And there is more to do next time. We need to consider the origin of our food, the nature of transport when touring, even where a cultural institution banks and invests its pensions, since divesting will have so much more effect than any singular pre-used material in any set. The headline of this is, Exodus was not a case of less at any point. The future is full of possibilities when collaboration across teams, venues, companies, and countries is at the forefront. And as Gemma said, that is something Scotland does pretty well. Could Exodus have been more green? Truthfully, yes. Was it so much better than similar shows in the past? Absolutely. Did we compromise on aesthetic, impact, or functionality? A strong no. Yes, the process had to change for me as a director, but that's because change is going to require change from us all. Health and safety was once an unthinkable inconvenience that could never be the norm. I cannot build that in as a director, and now it's completely embedded and fine. And as soon as I acknowledged the resistances and challenges, my role as a director in the change became clear. Directors are really good at galvanizing large groups of people to do inconvenient things. We're very good creating problem solvers in a crisis, and we're particularly good at holding two opposing truths. We have an hour of tech left, but we will finish the show. We'll make a spectacle, but it will be green. And, I've lost my place. Exodus was as high quality and high impact as we hoped, and ended up being the highest selling show at the Traverse that year. Thank you. Once I abandoned the myth that the work would be in any way diminished and instead reshaped the process so that green was the ground it grew from, I learned that we can not only welcome the intersectional cultural shift that needs to happen, but we as directors are the builders for it. We are the advocates for it, and we absolutely are the leaders too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. I told you it was going to get a bit more optimistic. No, this is brilliant.